Even our atheist friends are scratching their heads saying, wow, you've seen everybody's seen now online the image where they did the computer-generated model of how quickly and how close that came to his ear.
Here with us is Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson. Thank you so much for being here with us.
Thanks for having me.
So we wanted to just dive right in and ask you about this attempted assassination of former President Donald Trump. Have you gotten a chance to speak with him about this?
I have. I've spoken to him at length, and I've also talked to the people who were supposedly in charge of security that day. I've talked to Secretary Mayorkas at Homeland Security. I talked to the Director of National Intelligence. I talked to the leadership of the FBI. The answers that they are providing to us thus far are not satisfactory, and so I announced this morning that we're going to set up a special task force, a precision strike on this. It'll be a bipartisan investigatory group, and they will have subpoena authority. We're going to get down to the bottom of this quickly. I also called for the director of the Secret Service, Ms. Cheadle, to step down from her post. I think she needs to resign because I think what happened there does not require a thorough investigation. We can all see and understand just by what we've observed that there was serious security lapses. And her initial explanation that the roof was too slanted to provide security there just doesn't wash.
No, it doesn't. So in your conversations with Director Wray, for example, what kind of explanations are these authorities giving?
Well, I haven't talked to Director Wray himself. I talked to his second in command, and the FBI their investigation is really devoted exclusively to the shooter himself, whether there are others involved in the plot, what is the background of all of that. And I understand that, and I gave them a little deference. It's the Secret Service itself that was in charge of the overall operation, and obviously that's all under the Department of Homeland Security. And so Mayorkas has now taken the reins of that. We're hearing this morning that he is going to instruct Director Cheadle not to appear on Capitol Hill to answer the first round of questions. I hope that's not true. Our Oversight Committee and our Homeland Security Committees appropriately acted quickly and issued notices for these hearings that would begin next Monday. But so far, they look to be non-responsive to that, so we'll have to dig in further.
Why would they not want to give us answers on this?
That's a great question, isn't it? I mean, the American people deserve these answers. We are going to get them and be very aggressive in doing so. But every day that goes by, it's more and more dangerous because people begin to imagine that there's a conspiracy of some kind, right? The answers seem to be pretty clear. There were serious lapses. They need to be acknowledged. They need to own up to them, and we need to have accountability and move forward and make sure this never happens again.
Right. Now, I've seen a lot of Republican lawmakers kind of unified in saying that they believe this was an act of God, that President Trump wasn't killed. I've seen you saying that yourself. What do you make of this very unified response?
Yeah, I don't think anyone can deny that. I mean, even our atheist friends are scratching their heads saying, wow, everybody's seen now online the image where they did the computer-generated model of how quickly and how close that came to his ear. I've spoken to the president about this myself, and I reminded him the first thought I had on Saturday evening after we were ensured that he was okay and he wasn't struck is that it reminded me of the story of George Washington, who was our bulletproof president. We used to remind ourselves, and we were taught in school. They don't teach it anymore, sadly. But there's the famous story of him in 1755 where he was in the French and Indian War, and he went through the woods in an ambush of gunfire. And there were many rifles trained upon him, and they all shot at him. 2 horses were shot beneath him. He took a third and finished the battle. He was a young Army colonel at the time. But the story is famous and true that he took his coat off and he had 4 bullet holes in his coat. None of them struck him. And he wrote home to his family that it appeared to him quite obvious that the hand of Providence, he said, saved him for something that might come larger in his life. And we all know the story now. It's a famous story of American history. Saturday night, after we knew Trump was okay, I pulled out the old history book to read it because I hadn't read it in a long time, and it struck me. That event actually took place less than 50 miles from where Trump was shot at in Pennsylvania in the summer, in July.
Wow.
Now, you could say that's coincidence, but I don't. I say it's Providence. And I relayed the story to President Trump, and I told him, Mr. President, what a profound thing it is to have been truly protected and saved by God for what appears to be your next assignment, which is to lead the greatest nation in the history of the world for the second time. We should just pause and reflect on that, And I think he is. I think you can see it on his face. I think he's contemplating the history and the weight of this, the gravity of that moment, really the providential, aspects of all of this. And I think that's why you're hearing a little bit different tone from him in the last couple of days. He says he's going to rewrite his speech that we'll deliver here tomorrow night.
Right.
We're anxiously awaiting that message, and I think it'll be a profound one.
Wow. Now, we know you have a personal relationship with the president. Can you share a little bit with us about some things we might not know about Trump that you might have gotten to understand from your relationship with him?
My wife, Kelly, often says, I so wish that all of the American people could know and experience the Donald Trump that we know, because in small groups, and everyone will tell you this, and you've heard it before, but in small groups, he's so engaging. He's just a fun person to be around. He's genuinely concerned about the well-being of everyone around him. He has a big caring heart. I mean, some of this doesn't come across all the time in the battles that we have in our politics, but he's a really just a super friendly person. He still sort of thinks of himself as being in the hospitality business because that's his background. I mean, we have all these stories. We were flying around on Air Force One during the first Trump administration, and he comes into the cabin asking members of Congress, "Are you okay? Is the seat comfortable enough? Would you like another Diet Coke?" We're like, "You're the president of the United States." He's a lot of fun to be around, and the more that people get to see and engage with him in that way, I think it humanizes him. The left spends so much time and energy in trying to demonize Donald Trump. I mean, there's no figure in the modern era, I've said probably since Abraham Lincoln, no political figure that has been so demonized and attacked and just persecuted. I mean, in the media, with obviously elected officials who are Democrats, but even now in the court system, they've used lawfare, and now an assassination attempt, and yet he's such a strong individual that he keeps coming back and he keeps fighting, as he said, and I think that inspires the country. I think he can be a unifying figure.
I have a friend who was at that rally and said that Donald Trump raising his fist and saying "fight, fight, fight" really reassured the crowd, and he thinks it prevented a stampede from happening.
Yes, absolutely right. And who would have had the presence of mind to react like that after having been shot in the face? I mean, I've talked to lots of my buddies who are former special forces, and even they say it's so remarkable. Most people would duck and run,
Right.
And he defied even the protection around him. He didn't know when he stood and raised his fist if there might be other snipers. He didn't know if another bullet would be coming. But his first concern is the people, and he wanted them to reassure them and to say, keep fighting, keep standing. I mean, it's just a really remarkable thing in history.
Now, I want to switch gears a little bit and ask you about our potential vice president, J.D. Vance.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of demonizing, I've seen a lot of oppo on him the last few days. What are your thoughts on him as our potential vice president?
Been there, done that. When I got elected speaker, they did oppo on me for like 3 months. I mean, this is part of the deal when you are raised to one of these positions. And J.D. is still relatively new on the national scene. He's only been in the Senate a couple years, and but he's an extraordinary talent. He will be one of the youngest persons ever elected vice president, and I'm convinced they will be. And he's also one of the most intelligent. What I love about J.D., we have a lot in common in our backgrounds. We both come from very, very humble beginnings, and from broken families, and he emerged through that and made his way. He wound up at the Yale Law School. He served in the Marines, of course, and was very successful in business. It's just a purely American story, but he's never forgotten his roots. Famously has written about it and movie produced about it. I think that gives him an extraordinary ability to communicate with working class folks, the people that we come from, the people that we are. And I think that's going to be really important in this election cycle. And he can speak to the Rust Belt and the area of the country that he's from, but to all Americans who are all struggling, because he understands those struggles. He's lived it. We've lived it. We've been there. And I think that's a really powerful thing to add to the ticket. And I cannot wait for the debate between him and Kamala Harris. I mean, come on.
That will be very interesting. I have one more question for you on the same topic. I saw yesterday that ProPublica put out an oppo piece on J.D. Vance, and their main line in it was that he had said at a Leonard Leo event that he believes in the devil. And that was the crux of this story. It reminded me of some of the oppo on you and your faith. Do you think that some of these media outlets are aware of where Americans really stand when it comes to faith and religion?
I think they discount it, and I think they do that at their peril. And, I've been around the country. The Speaker of the House's job when we're not in session is to go and campaign for all of our incumbents and our challenges that we recruited to flip these seats from blue to red. And my team keeps track of this. I've done events in 144 cities in 31 states. I mean, multiple events in all these locations over the last 7 months. It doesn't matter where we are in the country, north, south, east, west. people understand that there are bigger things at play here. This is not just a battle between Republicans and Democrats. As I said in my speech here at the convention last night, this is a battle between two completely different visions for who we are as Americans and what we're going to be. And we believe in the foundational principles of the country. We espouse them still today. We believe in the principles articulated in the Declaration of Independence, the self-evident truths that we are made by God and that He's the one that gives us our rights and not the government. Those are things worth fighting for, and the woke progressive left is at war against those principles. They don't believe in the things that made America great. They don't believe in those foundations. And so we have a stewardship obligation to fight for them. I think J.D. Vance will do that well, and I think Donald Trump is doing that well again, and I think all of us have a responsibility to do the same.
Last question before you go. Do you think that Vance will be a game changer in Congress in Republicans' ability to make moves and get things done?
I hope so. He certainly understands the legislative process, and having him, on the team going forward, I'm so bullish about November. I'm convinced that we're going to win back the White House and Republican control the Senate and grow the House majority as well. And it's going to be a very important thing for the country. I told President Trump, and I'll tell J.D., we visited a little bit night before last. We were sitting together in the booth up there. It was like being at a UFC fight with Trump. We walked into the arena. It was so much fun. But I told him, I said, this could be the most consequential administration of the modern era because we have so many things to fix. And Congress will be a big part of that. We'll have a unified team and a unified front and a very aggressive first 100 days agenda for the beginning of the next Congress, beginning in January. And J.D., having had that background and that insight, I think will be a key component to that. So we're really looking forward to the days ahead of us.
Well, thank you so much for your time. We're so grateful to you for joining us.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Thanks for having me.